It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. You can find a link to my work over at emailrevealer.com. You can also go there and get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. This show is brought to you by cartking.com. That's cart-king.com. And if you need a cart or a kiosk, a food cart or a beverage cart or a coffee kiosk, they'll go to their website, cartking.com. They'll design it for you. They'll build it for you. And they'll ship it worldwide, anywhere on the planet, cartking.com. Okay, now we have a returning guest. We just had him on last week, but I could never get enough of Doug Caddy. I love him, okay? He just came out with a great new book, Being There, Witness to History, and that's a fact. Doug Caddy has been a witness to history. He's been behind the scenes of a lot of stuff. We talked last week about the JFK assassination and about some Watergate stuff with Robert Merritt and some stuff that really blew me away. So we didn't get to the rest of the stuff in the book, so he's gracious enough to come back. So Doug Caddy, are you there?
Yes, I am, Ed, and thank you for inviting me to be on your program.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoy it when you come here. But last time, I neglected to say, to give your resume and tell the audience, who is Doug Caddy?
Okay, who am I, in other words?
Yeah, tell us about yourself, yeah.
Okay, basically, my book, Being There, Eyewitness to History, is my autobiography, which traces my early years right up to the present time. And I start off with showing that I got involved in politics at an early age in high school. I was at Alcee Fortier High School in New Orleans, and at that time, Senator McCarthy was up for being censured, and I went over to a rally in favor of him in Audubon Park, and this is 1954. And the organizers of that park asked that I set up a card table in front of St. Louis Cathedral in the French Quarter and collect signatures on a petition in favor of Joe McCarthy against the censure of him. As a result, I started working with Guy Bannister, who was at that time former FBI agent, assistant chief of police in New Orleans, and later he became the handler of Lee Harvey Oswald in the months before the assassination when Oswald was in New Orleans. But this was 1954 and 55, and at that time, Lee Harvey Oswald was going into high school in New Orleans. I was going to high school in New Orleans, a different high school in New Orleans, and Guy Bannister had his office within walking distance there of all three of us. And we did not know that 8 years later, our lives would be entirely changed. As I mentioned, Lee Harvey Oswald would become the alleged assassin of JFK in Dallas, and as I mentioned, Guy Bannister would be alleged to be his handler in New Orleans before that occurred, and I later became the attorney for E. Howard Hunt, who was more than a bench warmer. In his deathbed confession, he calls himself a bench warmer, but more than that, he was actually on the grassy knoll with Frank Sturgis at the time of the assassination of JFK. And I trace in my book through the rise of the conservative movement, in which I was very active in the 50s and 60s, and into Watergate, and then in the JFK assassination, because no one knew in Watergate, though it was one of the most controversial investigations that ever occurred in Washington, the Senate Watergate Committee and the special prosecutor, nobody knew at that time, it was never revealed, that the burglars that went into Watergate were the same team, that one of the three teams that went into Dallas to assassinate JFK. And it was the same people, but that never came out. So while JFK assassination took place before Watergate by about 9 years or so, in my book I reverse it, because if nobody found out until subsequently, to Watergate of the JFK assassination.
Well, let me ask you a quick question to interrupt you there. At the time when you were representing Hunt and the other Watergate burglars, did you at that time have any suspicions that they were involved in Watergate in JFK?
No, I did not. I do know. I will say this: that whenever I had a conversation with Howard Hunt, invariably, and I had hundreds of conversations with him, it would always come back to the Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs, and he was adamant in his criticism of John Kennedy and how Kennedy had handled the Bay of Pigs in calling off the invasion, essentially, while it was underway. Basically, so many people were lost, but he never alluded to the assassination at all in those conversations.
And what about your friendship with Bannister? Did you ever come to suspect that he would be involved in something like that?
No. Bannister was kind of a mysterious character even in those days in New Orleans. And he and I appeared at a rally on behalf of it was called a Free Enterprise rally there in New Orleans in 1959. We shared the stage with Medford Evans, and it was Guy Bannister and myself talking about free enterprise as opposed to communism, because there was a international conference of youth being held in Vienna, and we were putting on a conference there in New Orleans in opposition to what was going on in Vienna, because we felt it was too much controlled by the Soviets. But Guy Bannister, he was a very colorful person, but you could tell that he carried with him a great deal of secrets, and as I understand it, when he died, Kent Courtney, who was one of his close friends, called, and his wife was in the midst of burning all of his files in the fireplace. He wanted his files destroyed, or most of them destroyed. But after my next venture, so to speak, in history was Koreagate, which followed upon the heels of Watergate, and that's where almost 100 members of Congress were accused of accepting money from the Korean government. They didn't know at the time it was coming from the Korean CIA to Tongson Park, who was my roommate in college at Georgetown in the 50s. And that's how I got involved in it, because of my close friendship with Tongson Park. I didn't actually know anything about the money being passed to these members of Congress, but the issue before in Koreagate and why money was being passed to members of Congress was the South Korean government was afraid that the American troops were going to be withdrawn by Nixon from South Korea. And this was in 1976. And isn't it ironic, right, 75, 76, isn't it ironic that even today that is still a crucial issue, whether our troops, we have about 30,000 troops there in South Korea, whether they're going to be withdrawn or not. So all the time that has elapsed, it's still a crucial issue.
Yeah, perhaps Trump just floated that trial balloon to get those faucets opened up again with that flow of Korean money flowing back into the United States.
It could be.
He knows where to make a buck, that's for sure.
Anything is possible these days. Yeah. Everything is so Byzantine, right?
And then I tell you, your politics have changed drastically over the years, though, haven't they?
Yes, I went from being one of the founders of the modern conservative movement. I organized. While I was in college, the National Student Committee for the Loyalty Oath in 1958, which later became, we then organized Youth for Goldwater for Vice President in 59, and in 1960 we organized Young Americans for Freedom. And it was a rally in March of 1961 at Manhattan Center in New York City that inaugurated the mass modern conservative movement. We had 3,000 people on the inside in that auditorium and 6,000 people on the outside wanted to get inside. And the New York Times carried it on the front page the next day. And that was the beginning of the modern conservative movement. There was no mass conservative movement. There was no conservative organizations basically in those days. And but I was a conservative, but really as a result of Watergate and I would say my education at Georgetown, I was in the School of Foreign Service there to be trained as a diplomat. And between that and my eyes being open to Watergate, all the things that went on there, I evolved, and today I'm a card-carrying member of the ACLU and quite proud of doing so.
I believe you supported Bernie in the last primary?
I did support Bernie. Yes, I did.
Yeah, so did I. Yeah. Okay, and what was your role then in Koreagate? What did you contribute to that?
Well, I really didn't know anything about the payoffs. I was actually in the midst of going to law school in New York City, evening law school. And in the daytime, I worked in Governor Rockefeller's office for the lieutenant governor, who was a conservative, Malcolm Wilson. And so this all took place in Washington. And so what happened was the Washington Post reporter decided to feature me in a major article on the front page of the Washington Post, being somehow involved in it. And as a result of that, I was subpoenaed to appear before the House committee that was a select committee that was investigating Koreagate, because there were so many members of the House that were involved in accepting this money. And so I went down there, and they asked if I had ever introduced a member of Congress to Tongson Park, and I couldn't remember of anybody that I had done so. But then they said, "What about Martin McNady?" But Martin McNady at the time was a former chairman, national chairman of the American Legion, national commander of the American Legion. And I did introduce him to Tongson Park, but that was way before he was elected to Congress. And I explained that to the staff, investigative staff, and they all left the room, and there was this big file on the table there. It said, "File on Douglas Caddy." Okay, I knew it was a false file because I wasn't involved in it. They wanted to see if I would reach over and just see what was in that file, but I just sat there. And about 5 minutes later, they all came back in, and the leader said, "Well, Mr. Caddy, you're going to be our lead witness at our public hearings, so going to be televised nationally on Koreagate." And I was shocked because I really didn't know anything about it. What I'm going to say, just as in the whole case was focused on me, and they would break and work in the cream. So it was done and water or attention away was real, and wasn't again focused on me. I'm an innocent fish. To one big fish to escape, and that's what I'm going to tell the people if I testify. As I said, this would be a rigged investigation. They all looked shocked, and they said, "Well, Mr. Caddy, you were excused." And I never heard anything more from that committee. That was the end of that. I called their bluff. And they only found one member of Congress guilty who had to go to. I saw him interviewed on TV at the time, and he said, I'm the fall guy. There had to be at least one fall guy in this whole investigation, make it look like it was a properly conducted investigation. I'm the fall guy. Congressman Hanna of Republican of California. And about 10 members of Congress resigned, did not run for re-election. But the real big fish was Tip O'Neill, who had actually helped Tongson Park in business in doing business operations that they were involved in. But never got to Tip O'Neill. The investigation was off, so it never got to the higher ups.
But you were aware that Tip O'Neill had gotten some money?
Yes, Tip O'Neill was deeply involved in it all, and
okay.
It's kind of ironic because there was a major investigation, and the Senate Intelligence, it was the Senate Intelligence Committee that had put out a report on Koreagate. This is in 1976. I quote from it in my autobiography. But here we have, at this time, we have through the NRA, these allegations coming out that the Russian money went into the NRA, which was distributed to Republican candidates for the House and the Senate in the 2016 election. So it's just like it was with Koreagate. It was foreign money coming into this country, but in this case it was a disguise through the NRA, National Rifle Association. And as you know, last week the Justice Department, the Treasury Department issued a regulation very quickly,
right,
saying that the donors and the financial records of the NRA do not have to disclose publicly anymore. So the cover-up is underway as to foreign money coming into our country from Russia and going right into the hands of politicians for their re-election.
And if you notice, too, that's not being reported by either side. That's not being reported by the Democrats or the MSNBC or Fox News, that new regulation that they passed.
Yes, it's a major change, and it was done very, very hurriedly. Actually, it was done after they arrested that young woman.
Right.
I would say young woman. I guess she's about 35 years old. Who's been alleged to be a spy, and she was very active in the NRA, and apparently it was the conduit for much of the money from Russia into the NRA. And and the judge ruled that she's being held without bail. She's locked up. She hasn't been released, and the Russians have demanded that she be released, but they're not going to release her because she has so much incredible information, which our prosecutors of our country want before, and she's going to go to trial. And so we'll learn a great deal about how foreign money came into the election, into the 2016 election, not only for president, but for the House and Senate races, as a result of the trial of this young woman.
Yeah, it seems like the Russians had a lot more influence than we even first believed.
The Russians' intelligence, I think, is in many ways superior to ours. They think in the long-term, decades ahead. And I was just reading a report by a Russian defector of about 20 years ago, in which he outlined exactly how what their plan, which they said started 80 years ago against the United States. And they painstakingly have pursued that plan to bring our country down, to destroy our democracy. And I think they're on their way to doing it, unless something happens.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like we're taking any steps to prevent. But it also seems like so many of these congressmen are have their hand out as well. Like Rohenbacher seems like to be mixed up in everything.
Yes, he does. That's that congressman from Orange County there.
Yeah.
And he definitely is, and he's been linked to this young woman from Russia again.
Okay.
And so it's going to be quite interesting. I think that's one of the most interesting cases that has come out in the investigation of Trump and Russia is this young woman who's been arrested, and she's being held without bail.
Yeah, because she had all these boxes packed up. She was ready to skip town there and head back to Moscow, I guess. Right? So
yeah.
This might be a good time to take a commercial break. And when we get back, because Doug Caddy, I was reading your book here about the part about Trump and Russia, and you knew all these guys. You knew Stone and Manafort and all these characters in your 20s, I guess, right?
Yes, I knew them right in the wake of Watergate.
Okay.
Right when Watergate was the special prosecutor and the Senate Watergate Committee was holding their hearings. I knew all those individuals.
Okay, then let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back with Doug Caddy. The book is called Being There, Eyewitness to History. And I got to tell you something. If there's ever a book, I get so many books, come to me. And if there's ever a book I would love to have autographed by the author, it's this one, Doug. I got to tell you, I'm really just fascinated with your life. And I encourage people, too, to go back and find the first couple of interviews I did with Doug Caddy. I believe one night we did 3 hours. Okay, we were both kind of shocked the last time we talked. But I believe one night we did a 3-hour interview 4 years ago. So we'll be right back with more of Doug Caddy. And now a word from our sponsors. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application, from large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee station carts. CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website. Please visit them today at CartKing.com. That's cart-king.com. Or just call them at 1-877-986-7771. That's 877-986-7771. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subhash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subhash Technosis by email at info@subhashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subhashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing you narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with Doug Caddy, and I'm talking about his book, Being There, Eyewitness to History. So, Doug, one of the last chapters, or maybe the last chapter in the book, describes how you became involved with Mueller and Comey and Trump and Russiagate. What can you tell us about that?
Well, for several years, and actually a number of years, I had known several of the leaders of the LaRouche organization.
Right.
Lyndon LaRouche, I went to one meeting at which he spoke, and he struck me as really a zealot and someone that you couldn't really reason with. He had his own views, and he didn't entertain anybody to challenge them, but he had 3 or 4 fellows underneath him who were very reasonable, and they were extremely bright and intelligent, and I always found the information that they provided to be really very valuable, and it wasn't slanted in any way. And one of them was Harley Schlanger, and so I received a phone call from Harley Schlanger in January of 2016, and he said that he would very much appreciate if I could introduce him to Roger Stone. He knew that I knew Roger Stone. Roger Stone was Roger Stone and Donald Trump studied politics and how to do things under Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn taught them how to all the unsavory things that they have engaged in the practice of politics, so Roger Stone came from that background, and I knew him. I knew Roger Stone because in the early 1970s, the National Conservative Political Action Committee was formed. It was one of the first political PACs where people contributed money in small amounts and supported conservative candidates. And I was legal counsel. Terry Dolan was the executive director, but his close friend was Roger Stone. And so Paul Manafort was also involved, but to a lesser degree. So I knew Roger in that capacity, and also he wrote a book about the Kennedy assassination and about Nixon. And, so they were actually almost national bestsellers. They were on the New York Times bestseller list 2 or 3 years ago. And before he wrote that, he contacted me and asked me to provide any material, which I did, and credited me in that book, in his books. But so Harley Schlanger asked me to introduce him to Roger Stone. This was in January of 2016, and the election was going to be in November, we know. And so I did. I had a severe attack of allergies at that time, so I could not attend the meeting they had in Austin, Texas. But out of that became a close relationship between Harley Schlanger and the LaRouche organization and Roger Stone.
Well, let me stop you for a second.
The thing about this,
wait, Doug,
the interesting thing.
The meeting took place in Austin, Texas, so each of them flew to Austin, Texas for the purpose of this meeting?
Roger Stone was signing autographs at a book event there in Austin, and Harley Schlanger actually was stationed here in Houston, where I am at the present time.
Okay.
And so it was a convenient place for the two of them to get together.
Okay.
But what's interesting, and it did not come out until later, that Harley Schlanger and others of the LaRouche organization attended that famous dinner in December of 2015 in celebrating the 25th anniversary or the 20th, some anniversary of Russia Today, the radio and television program that comes out of Russia.
Right.
That's where Putin was there, and General Flynn was sitting next to Putin, and so the LaRouche organization was very active, a very active supporter of Russia, always has been, and so they had a delegation present at that dinner. And what I read into this later on, and I asked that it be investigated, was whether Harley's assignment came out of that meeting there. They said get as close as you can to the people around Donald Trump, and so I did introduce them to. They did meet as a result of my introduction, and they had TV, radio interviews on the LaRouche radio station, radio programs, and so forth, and I had an email correspondence with both of them, and there is a section of the law called misprision of a felony, whereby if you have knowledge of the possibility of a felony having been committed or actually being committed, you as a citizen have an obligation to report this to the authorities, and if you don't, you subject yourself to severe penalties, including being prosecuted. So being an attorney, I'm admitted to the District of Columbia Bar and the Texas Bar. I felt an obligation to report what I had set up at the request of Harley Schlanger of the LaRouche organization as a result of this dinner in Moscow, was Roger Stone, who became the first campaign manager for Donald Trump when he announced for president. And in my letter to FBI Director Comey, and later after he was fired, I wrote Special Counsel Mueller. I said, I'm not in a position to investigate this matter. I'm just providing you these emails and this correspondence and my knowledge. It's all up to you to pursue it from here, from this point on. And I feel sure it has been explored. At one time, Lyndon LaRouche was, I think unfairly, but he was sent to prison as a result of the fundraising activities of the LaRouche organization. I think he was singled out by George H.W. Bush as president to be penalized, and the prosecutor at that time was actually Mueller, Robert Mueller.
Really?
And so Mueller had a long knowledge of the LaRouche organization. And so if Roger Stone is indicted, we'll wait and see if any of the information I provided to Comey and to Mueller appears in the indictment. And if any of the LaRouche people are witnesses at that investigation at the trial of Roger Stone.
I don't believe we've heard the name LaRouche brought up before in this investigation of the Russian connection to Trump. Have you heard it in the media brought up before?
No, there's been no connection in the media at all. But I posted online in the on the education forum my attorney's file on the whole matter, and I did mention this little-known statute called misprision of felony. And a number of people have talked about that. As a result, nobody really knew it existed. It never had never really been cited publicly very much. But as a result of the circulation of my file on the education forum, it has come out. I have seen members of Congress and media talking about it. I know Adam Schiff was asked, and he said, "Well, if you have an official capacity such as an attorney, you certainly have an obligation to let the authorities know if you think there's been any wrongdoing. You have a legal obligation to do so."
Now, since you've made this letter public in the book and you posted it in the education forum, have you heard from Roger Stone since then?
No, I haven't heard from Roger Stone at all. No, I have not.
Okay. And you describe in the book that you were being followed and harassed by some private investigators?
Well, I was for a while there, but that ceased. Actually, I publicized it on the education forum, and as soon as I publicized it, that activity ceased. But they were very they were doing things when I was driving. They would cut me off and try to force me off the road and things like that. But that ceased once I made it public, so that was no longer an issue.
And how did you determine that they were private investigators?
Well, I'd gone through this with the Moody Foundation scandal, which is a separate issue, a separate chapter in my book about the Moody Foundation scandal. When the Moody Foundation out of Galveston, Texas, is a very rich and powerful foundation, and it had a tremendous scandal. At one time, I was a whistleblower on it, and it went to tax. I talk about the case going to tax court and so forth. But at that time, I was I was followed by private detectives for quite a while, and actually the Houston Chronicle carried articles about this at the time of the harassment that I was undergoing for having blown the whistle on this on the Moody Foundation scandal. So I was somewhat. This was in the 1980s, about 1986 or so. So I recognized what was going on.
Did you have a contact? You assume? I guess you're assuming that it's Stone who put these or maybe LaRouche put them on you.
Oh no, I don't think. No, I think it was the Trump organization.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would make sense too.
They don't want this brought out. They were trying to cut this whole thing off, and they're involved right now. Is my understanding they're involved right now in formulating plans to go after anybody they consider a vociferous opponent of Donald Trump or his policies and so forth. They'll go after them in different ways, maybe using the IRS and agencies and so forth.
It's about time he got up to speed on that kind of thing. He's been in office about a year and a half and hasn't really gotten organized and to go after his enemies as he's attempting to right now. What can you tell us about? There's a story in here about why you think that Roger Stone is a sociopath or a psychopath, you called him, because of an incident when you were walking down the street one time?
Well, yeah, I was called by, I recounted this many years ago to a commentator from Fox News who had called me about Roger Stone. But this is when I was legal counsel of the National Conservative Political Action Committee. And Terry Dolan and Roger Stone and I had lunch there in Roslyn, Virginia, which is right across the Potomac River from Washington. And we were walking down the street afterwards. And across the street was this woman who was bent over completely at the waist, where curvature of the spine. It's people like you see in the Far East who've spent their whole life picking rice and these things from fields. They just have curvature of the spine that way. And it looked like she was probably with her son and daughter, who were young adults. And anyway, Roger Stone started laughing and pointing at her, It was so embarrassing, and laughing and pointing at her, and then he started mimicking her curvature of the spine walking down the street. And I was, as I told this commentator from James Rosen, who it was from Fox News, I said I was so embarrassed. I ran into a public garage there where cars were parked. I just had to get away. I was so embarrassed. But this is, Roger Stone has many talents, and I recommend his book, the books he has written in recent years on Nixon and on JFK. And he loves publicity. He's a great, he knows how to get publicity, but there is this side of him, just like with Trump, of narcissism and sociopath and borderline psychopath. And it's come back to haunt him now after all these years. He really was a key person who got the 2000 elections in Florida swung in favor of George W. Bush against Al Gore. And in 2004, he worked in Ohio, which was a tipping point in the re-election of George W. Bush. He's always been involved in rigging national elections, and he did so this time around with Trump. But it's a different story this time because Mueller is on the trail. I think Mueller is going to come out. What Mueller is going to come out with will shock the world, completely shock the world.
Yeah, I agree.
Very reserved. But from what I saw in Watergate, and which has so many parallels, I predict it will shock the world that what he will come out with.
And do you think how do you think it will end up for Trump with just an impeachment, or do you think he'll have to resign? Maybe perhaps an indictment, a criminal indictment. Is that possible?
I think it's possible. It would have to go maybe ultimately to the Supreme Court. But if the issue of whether after he was indicted, and he would challenge the indictment, saying, as president, I cannot be indicted, and this would wind its way up to the Supreme Court.
Right.
The Supreme Court is loaded 5-4 now with these people who would do anything to help the Republican Party. They're really they really actually think in terms of how can I help the Republican Party in most of their decisions these days. They're very slanted decisions. And but I think the Chief Justice and even those who are zealot Republicans would know that they would destroy the Supreme Court as an institution if they were to say, oh no, after all the evidence that had been presented by Mueller showing that Trump was a traitor, not only a traitor but a criminal, a master criminal for many, many years.
Right.
That say, oh no, because he's president, he cannot be indicted. That would destroy the Supreme Court. The revulsion of the American public would be such that the court would never regain any authority. And it would, and so they would. I think they would have to come down and support the position of Mueller that President Trump can be indicted.
Well, under normal circumstances, I would agree with you, but it just seems like all the norms have just been thrown out the window. With this Trump presidency, like meeting with Putin in private for 2 hours, just is so irregular.
It's very irregular, and I really think, to be honest, that I think Trump is a traitor. I think he's a Russian asset. I think his ego and it's really a matter of stupidity and also of greed. And I don't rule out that he hasn't given away our most vital secrets to the Russians. He may have even given our code to the football. The football was the fellow that walks around with the president. That's the code. That in case we were attacked, the code to activate our retaliation against being attacked with a foreign power with nuclear weapons. And I don't rule out that Trump has given away our most vital secrets to the Russians. I think it's that serious.
The man, he'll steal anything that's not nailed down, so it's not like it would be beyond him. Now, I'm sure you've read the entire Steele dossier, correct?
I read it, but some time ago. Mm-hmm.
Well,
I read it, yes. Mm-hmm. That's where it mentioned in the Steele dossier, by the way. It mentions the LaRouche organization. Or LaRouche, it said at this dinner was at that dinner with Putin and for Russia Today, that famous dinner there in December of 2015, that dossier talks about there being a delegation from the LaRouche organization present at that dinner.
Really, I must have skipped right over that part, because it does talk about Jill Stein being there. Right. So, what is your estimation of the Steele dossier?
I think thus far it looks like it's been proven to be very accurate.
Right. Yeah.
I think the author of it was knew what he was doing. He was a very skilled investigator, and I think it's very accurate.
I agree with you, but it's just amazing now. Like on right-wing talk radio and on Fox News, they can just repeat over and over the dodgy dossier, the discredited dossier, and just repeat it over and over and over again, and a good percentage of the population believes that.
Well, I was on Coast to Coast recently, and George Nurian was discussing this, and I pointed out to him, we've only heard one side, because Mueller never holds press conferences. We've only heard one side, which is this endless propaganda from Trump and Fox News and NRA and so forth. And so when Mueller does come down, he's not only has these indictments. We do have Paul Manafort's trials coming up, one next week and one in September in the District of Columbia. And I expect a number of indictments in August, a number of key indictments in August. And then we'll hear the other side of the story, but it's not only indictments. Mueller is preparing a report, and I think the report will probably be 2,000 or 3,000 pages, to be honest. Very detailed report, and which will go down in history of everything he's. There's no question in my mind, but he has gotten Trump's tax returns going back for many years, and the people on his staff who have the skill in accounting and taxes and so forth have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. And so all the financial shenanigans that Trump has been involved in my opinion, he became a Russian asset about 1987 when he went to Russia. That was the first time he went to Russia, and he came back praising how he'd been treated in Russia. He gave these press conferences saying he had such a wonderful trip to Russia, and he announced he was running for president. This was this would be in 1988. So he was converted at that time. I think he's been an asset to the at that time it was the communists. It was still the Soviet Union, but he's been controlled by the Russians since then.
Let me ask you a question. Are you aware of the lawsuit, the Caddy lawsuit against Trump and Jeffrey Epstein?
Somewhat, yeah. Whereby
the 13-year-old girl was
this young girl alleged that Trump forced sexual relations. But maybe you should describe it.
That she was raped at 13 years old by both Epstein and Trump, and Epstein is a convicted sex offender. Well, that's what he did. Right. He did that. He admitted doing it, not to her, but he admitted doing it to 30 girls. Now, so there's a lot of other stories out there. Okay, besides that story. Many stories. I was talking to someone the other day, and I heard 2 stories. How come Mueller is not looking into those kind of allegations?
Well, I think he is. Epstein, was an agent of a Mossad,
right? And
Mossad, he had this island in the Caribbean, and he brought all these people. Prince Andrew came down there. Clinton came. Bill Clinton went down there. All sorts of prominent people.
Sure.
And they got recorded on videotape. They got compromised. And I think Trump is among them. That's why Trump is so pro-Israel, and will do anything to help Israel because he's been blackmailed by so many parties. But let me just mention this: in the last week, Mueller has indicated that he's going to ask the former prostitute, a woman who was worked with Roger Stone for many years, to testify before the grand jury. Now, this is my guess. Okay, this is my guess of what's happening here. Okay. Roger Stone was instrumental in bringing down Governor Eliot Spitzer. Remember the governor of New York City?
Sure.
And he was instrumental in exposing this prostitution woman who ran the prostitution ring, set up Spitzer, and it was later sprung upon him that he had engaged in the services of the prostitution ring. And I think what Mueller is going to, and this is my guess, is going to show that Trump paid Roger Stone, or had a relationship with Roger Stone, and I'm just alleging here because I don't know whether this to be true or not, that they set up Spitzer and destroy him. Now, why would they want to destroy Spitzer? Well, one thing, he had the ability to investigate the Trump Foundation and in New York State,
right?
And which is now being is being sued by the state of New York. In addition, the Spitzer family were rivals in the real estate business with Trump, and this was a way to hurt a rival and solidify his own business for Trump, was to knock out Elliot Spitzer. So I'm just, these are allegations. I'm not saying this is the way. I have no idea why this, but it's very suspicious in my mind what's going on.
Very interesting, very interesting. And it's interesting, too, that Stone just recently did meet with a Russian gangster who wanted $2 million to provide, I guess it was the emails or dirt for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll just have to wait and find out what Mueller has. I mean, from Roger Stone's viewpoint, I think it was very foolish. He's attacked the prosecutor again and again and again, putting his thumb in Mueller's eye over and over, and this is a very foolish thing to do to a prosecutor who has all that power. And so we'll just have to see what happens. It looks to me like Mueller has Stone as a target.
If I ever had Stone on the show, I would want to ask him about his friendship and his work on the campaigns of Al Sharpton. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything about that at all.
Fascinating that he would be Sharpton's campaign manager so many times in so many different, with Sharpton selling out the Democratic Party to split the Democratic vote. I'd love to get Stone's on the show someday. I guess. Now, you haven't heard from any of these guys, Manafort, since he's been arrested or anything like that? No.
No, none of them.
Okay.
But this is. I identified them this way back in the 1970s as being sociopath, and it was Stone, Manafort, and it was Black, Manafort, and Stone. That was the firm,
right.
The public relations firm, lobbying firm that they created, and this is the way they acted in those days. They could get away with it in those days because under Reagan. Anybody who was close to Reagan benefited very much. But now it's come back to haunt both Manafort and Stone.
Yeah, the Black, Manafort, and Stone firm was known as the dictators, the terrorists, no, the torturers PR firm, because they would represent all these dictators who were famous for torturing their own citizens.
Right.
Yeah.
But Roger Stone, he's obviously a very talented political operative. It's just at this time, it looks to me like, he's a charming in person. He's a very charming person. It looks to me like he just went too far and got caught this time. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Is there anything else about the Trump-Russia situation you'd like to share with us before we move on to another topic?
Do I have anything else about? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
Anything else to share?
Russia?
Yeah.
No, I do not.
Okay. Then what would you like to cover now? When you were the threat to your life in this Moody situation, you want to talk about that, or?
Well, what happened was in 1979 I moved from Washington D.C. I had, in the wake of Watergate, which went on from 72 to about 76. I actually had dinner with Howard Hunt in 1975, just as he was getting ready to go to prison to serve those 3.5 years. And so in 1979, I decided that, Washington was not for me anymore. I'd seen too much and been too soured by what I saw. So I came to Texas. My parents lived in Texas, and so I went to work in the Governor Clement's administration under the Secretary of State George Strait, and I was essentially director of elections for the state of Texas. There are 254 counties, and what I did in 1911 was almost and teach officials how to administer the elections, because at that time there were 6 different types of voting machines that were being used. But I got a call from Howard Phillips, the Conservative Caucus out of Washington. He was one of the founders of Young Americans for Freedom, and he said that the Moody Foundation wanted to give a grant, but it had begun given to a Texas corporation, nonprofit corporation, and would I form one, which I did. Exit Policy Institute, and they got a grant from the Moody Foundation to put on a conference on Star Wars. Before Reagan announced Star Wars, we had a conference here in Galveston on Star Wars. But as a result of that, Robert Sherman Moody, who was one of the 3 trustees of the Moody Foundation, got a call from his former lobbyist, Jimmy Day, who was in prison in Midland, Texas, Big Spring Prison. And he went to prison not for anything he'd done for Moody, but he had gone to Washington after he left Moody's employment, and he stole stationery from the White House when he was visited at the White House there. They wrote letters on the White House stationery to praise James, the praise of being skilled lobby. But the point is, he simply saw this next to me. He's here in prison. He wants to speak to Sherman Moody. And Billy Solestis was the bagman and silent business partner of Lyndon Johnson from the very beginning, all the way up to when Johnson was start of his political career in 1948, when he rigged that election and got elected U.S. Senator on up to the presidency. And so he said he wanted to tell what he knew. But Lyndon Johnson had died in 1973, and this call came in 1983. So I went up and visited Billy Saul Estes in prison and suggested him that he write a book. And he said he would think about it. When he got released, he called up Sherman Moody again, the trustee, and said he did want to write a book. He had given the idea to his daughter, Pam Estes. She wrote a book called Billy Saul Estes, King of the Wheeler Dealers, which was widely reviewed and really very well written. And it was about what happened to the family while he was in prison. He had 2 prison terms. Billy Saul Estes had 2 prison terms. But it wasn't about anything that he knew. It was all about what the family went through while he was in prison. So he wanted to tell his story. And so I went up and visited with him, and the Moody Foundation agreed to a grant that would be going through the Abilene Christian University. And then 2 things happened. Billy Saul Estes testified before the Robertson County Grand Jury here in Texas about a murder of the Department of Agriculture employee who had stumbled upon and put together the criminal activities involving Billy Saul Estes and millions of dollars had gone astray. And he was killed, and at that time in 1961, the investigation that really was suicide. But he used a rifle to shoot himself rifle 5 times for it to be a suicide, but that the real coroner said at the time. 1984, Saul testified before this grand jury as to what really happened, and they changed it from a suicide to homicide. And then Billy Saul Estes said, well, I need to have immunity from federal immunity if I'm going to tell what I know. And so I was working with Edward Miller, a former assistant director of the FBI, on putting together a foundation, Moody Foundation seminar on terrorism, and he arranged for the 2 of us, this is Edward Miller and myself, to visit the Attorney General Stephen Trott for the criminal division in the Justice Department, and we brought all this information from the press clippings and so forth, what had happened before the Robertson County Grand Jury, and Billy Saul's desire to tell what he knew. And as a result, the Assistant Attorney General asked the FBI to look into it and see if it would be justified pursuing this. They looked into their files and said that they would definitely be so. And so the 3 FBI agents flew down to Abilene, Texas, with Billy Saul, and I flew down separately, and I was in Abilene. But when Billy Saul and his daughter came into the hotel, it was an atrium hotel on the 12th floor with the 3 agents looking down at us at that initial meeting. Billy Saul said, I'm not going to talk about anything. I'm not going to say anything. I'm withdrawing my cooperation entirely. And I tried to reason with them, but meanwhile, before then, we had written a letter, a prophet what information he would provide to the Justice Department in reason for being immunity. And this is actually fairly well known where he outlines there are people on there were actually about 17 murders, ultimately about 17 murders that took place. Lyndon Johnson and Carter, his assistant in the White House era, and Mac Wallace, who was the stone killer that was on Lyndon Johnson's payroll in the Department of Agriculture, and Billy Saulestis, they decided who had to go and how they had to go. And so there was a series of murders. And one of the people killed was Lyndon Johnson's sister.
Right.
And I go into this in the book and describe how that happened, and I show that her birth certificate. She was poisoned on Christmas Eve in 1961. A piece of cake was given to her at that dinner there with the Johnsons, and the only other there was John Connolly and his wife. They did not know what was going on. And she died on Christmas Day, and she was buried the day after Christmas, and she's buried at the family cemetery right there on Lyndon Johnson's ranch. And so it was done very, very quickly. But she was talking too much. She had for many years she was a drug user, she was alcoholic, and she was telling too many of Lyndon Johnson's secrets. And Billy Saul recounts in his autobiography how the decision was made that she had to be killed. And so that's how she was killed. She was poisoned, and this was done when Lyndon Johnson was vice president in 1961. Nothing was going to stop him from becoming president. It was not going to let his sister, if it meant her death, so be it. Nothing was going to stop him from becoming president.
Doug, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. You're a fascinating font of information and insight into everything you discuss. What do you, in a minute, what do you want to leave us with?
Well, as I say in my book, my life has just been, I've been like a piece on a chessboard. These things have happened to me starting really before I was born. I describe what happened before I was born, and 3 months before I was born. And so people ask what my plans are now, and I always say that I'm just going to wait and see what move is made on the chessboard, because I really don't have any control. These things these events just happen, just like I described how Harley Slanger called me out of the blue and wanted to be introduced to Roger Stone.
Right.
And so I'll just have to wait and see what happens on the chessboard.
And how old are you, Doug?
I'm 80 years old, so I may be too old, but I still have
plenty of time.
My energy and vitality, so we'll see what happens.
Plenty of time to get in more trouble there, Doug. Listen, thank you so much, okay?
Thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Good night. Okay, they had Doug Caddy. Once again, the book is called Being There, Eyewitness to History. I got to tell you, you got to get this book, okay? It's a short book, too. It's not a big, long book. But the last 10 pages are all kinds of documents and pictures and photographs and news articles and stuff like that. Fascinating character, Doug Caddy here. And by the way, too, back the first time I interviewed him, about 3 years ago, it's a 3-hour interview. No one had interviewed him before. I found this guy. Okay, so now he's all over the place. He's on coast to coast. Okay, all right, but I had him first. All right, thank you so much. If you enjoy the show, don't forget our members section at OppermanReport.com and become a member. Help support the show. We haven't had a lot of memberships lately, I got to tell you that. I got some new content we're putting up there this weekend. I got a lot going on. Hey, don't forget to, it'll be too late by the time you hear this.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. And you can find a link to my work at emailrevealer.com. And that's where you can also go and find an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator, at emailrevealer.com. Show's brought to you by CartKing.com. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Like if you own a big office building or a warehouse or something like that, you put a coffee kiosk there in the lobby and you make a fortune. CartKing.com could be the answer to your needs. They're a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. Outdoor kiosks, food kiosks, smaller mobile coffee carts or kiosks. CartKing.com, that's CART-King.com. Give them a call at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. They'll cut you a good deal. They design it, ship it worldwide, CartKing.com. Okay, we have for you today a fascinating guest. You're probably better known as the Babushka lady for people that are really into the whole JFK assassination buffs, you might call them. But it's Beverly Oliver Massegee. Beverly, are you there? How did I do with the last name, Beverly? Did I get it right?
Massegee.
Massegee. Massegee. Okay. Massegee. What was wrong with the Massegee? I wrote it down, too. Anyway, Beverly, tell us about yourself. Who is Beverly Oliver Massegee?
There you go.
Yeah. Well, tell us about yourself.
What I saw?
No, about yourself. Who is Beverly Oliver Massegee?
Who am I?
Yeah.
I'm a mother and a wife of 47 years. I have 3 children that are living, and I'm the wife of an evangelist. So we travel and do revivals and revelation studies, and I sing. I still sing. I've been singing professionally since I was 9. And I just enjoy life. I don't know what else to tell you. I live day to day like everybody else does, and try to make the best of whatever comes.
You've had a very fascinating life, and you the day there in Dallas, you were captured in the Zapruder film. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I had not intended to go to Dealey Plaza that day. I had intended to go down one of the side streets and get up to the curb over on Main Street to get a film of the president. I had a brand new prototype camera, 8mm, and I was going to get a good film of the president. But as I was walking from the parking lot, I worked at the Colony Club, which was next door to Jack Ruby's Carousel Club. And we rented our parking places by the month, so I was parked there. And I got out and started walking toward, I guess that would be west, and you couldn't get down the side streets. It was just totally packed. And I kept walking, and finally I got down to what we used to call the grassy place. I didn't know it was Dealey Plaza back then. And I saw the way the people were lined up down Houston and then left on Elm. And it was quite crowded there still, but I looked down across right before you went under the triple overpass, and there was open space down there. There was only 4 or 5 people down there. So I made it across the 2 triangles of grass and went down there and found a place pretty close to the curb and where I could get good pictures. And when I got there, I took my camera, and I wanted to make sure that everything was working in order, so I took pictures of the crowd, pictures of buildings, and maybe 3 minutes of filming to make sure it was working right. And you could hear as the president got closer because the crowd got louder and louder and louder. And I have to say this. If Dallas hated JFK, I never want a president to come they love, because there were thousands, throngs of people down there. And they were yelling and screaming, "Mr. President, we love you," and stuff like that. So I knew that he was getting closer, and then they turned right onto Houston Street and then left onto Elm Street. And as they turned left onto Elm Street, I began to film. And right after they turned left on to Elm Street, there was a noise that went bang, bang, bang. And I remember thinking distinctly, do you remember those? You may not be old enough to remember those things that we used to throw against the sidewalk and they'd pop. You didn't
Sure.
have to ring, and they were called poppers.
Yeah, I remember those, sure.
And that's what it sounded. Huh?
I remember those, sure.
But that's why I remember thinking, why would somebody let their children bring something like that down here to a crowd like this on a day like this? And I'm filming in concert with the motorcade. And as I got just a little bit to my left, there was another noise that went ba-boom. And when that ba-boom happened, the president went violently back to the back, backwards, and over to the left a little bit. And it looked like somebody threw a whole bucket of blood out the back of his head and over the trunk of the car. There was so much blood that came out of his head that it actually sprinkled the motorcycle driver, the motorcycle policeman's shield was splattered with blood. And I really don't know if I actually remember this, because I went into shock. I'm standing here. Everybody's on the ground in this picture but me, and I'm standing with my camera still up to my chest. I was in shock. I could not move. People are always asking me, well, did the limousine stop? I don't know, Ed. The whole world stopped for me at that minute. It stopped. But I do know that Jacqueline crawled over the trunk, and some people say she was trying to get out of the car. She was not. There was a piece of his skull the size of a quarter, maybe a little smaller, on the trunk, and she got it in her hand as Clint Hill pushed her back in the car. And his testimony is that she tried to piece his head together all the way to Heartburn Hospital. And that's what I saw.
Let me ask you this: what? No one else was wearing a headscarf that day. What caused you to choose to wear a scarf that day?
Oh no! If you look at all the pictures, there's 30 women down there with headscarves.
Really?
It was, first of all, it was very popular back then because we didn't have. You're talking almost 55 years. This November the 22nd will be 55 years. And we didn't have the nice hairspray. As a matter of fact, the only one I remember back then was Get Set. No, that wasn't what it's called. Anyway, it was a pump spray. And so I had to, and I'm sure that's why everybody else, and plus it was raining that morning. It was misty. That's why I had an all-weather coat on. And but if you look at those pictures, there's several women down there with headscarves on. So I had to keep my hair nice for that night. I had on a wig, but I still had to keep it nice.
Then what is it that drew attention to you as the Babushka lady that was so out of place that people commented on your being there?
Well, I honestly, until I talked to Gary, I did not know people were researching the Kennedy assassination. I avoided it. I was scared. My boss, Abe Weinstein, told me to keep my mouth shut. And that's what I did. I avoided it for years until I did The Men Who Killed Kennedy, which was a documentary that Nigel Turner from the UK did in, I think it was 88. Until then, I had not been back to the plaza. I would go 15 miles out of my way to keep from going to the plaza. For me, it's not like a tourist going down there and looking. Every time, even today, when I go down there, my stomach gets tight. I get queasy because I relive it.
What happened right after the shooting? Were you contacted by the police? Were you questioned? Did you tell any of your friends or your family?
Not that day.
No?
Not that day. But I made eye contact with the policeman, a Dallas policeman that was down in Nebraska White, and he knew, I didn't know that was his name at that point in time. I just knew him as Geneva White's husband. Geneva White was Jack Ruby's hostess. And when we made eye contact, even though I had on a brown wig, I knew he recognized me because he was used to seeing me in purple hair and green hair, and, it was the 60s. And so I knew he recognized me, and at that point, I felt the liberty to leave because, we didn't have CB radios back then and cell phones and stuff like that. I wanted to know what happened to my president. So I left, and knowing that if they wanted to talk to me, he knew where to find me.
Okay.
And so I left, and I had an old car, an old Buick, and I couldn't hear on the radio. The radio didn't work in downtown Dallas until I got out on 75 at the old Holiday Inn that was almost downtown. And right at that exit, I heard Walter Cronkite. It wasn't the first time he had announced it, evidently, but he came on talking about the death of the president, and I pulled off and stayed in the parking lot for a while just crying. I couldn't do anything else. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I mean, this was my country, my government, my president. The whole world was upset and turned topsy-turvy at that point in time.
From the time you started filming, when did you stop filming? Like, what was going on when you turned the camera off?
I don't know. It definitely had to be after the headshot because I remember seeing the headshot distinctly, and as I was looking at it through the camera. When I stopped, I don't know, because like I said, I went into shock. I don't really even remember walking across the street. Now, I was hypnotized by Dr. Michael Sauer, who was the president of the Texas Association of Hypnotists, and I was hypnotized, and under hypnosis, it's very scary to listen to it. I talked about going across the street and all that stuff. But anyway, I don't remember. I just remember what I saw. And you asked me about what happened and everything. Well, about the policeman talking to me. Well, Monday morning, and I have the document in my possession from the U.S. Treasury Department, the FBI, and it says, talks about the woman in the brown coat taking pictures evidently at the time the president was shot. And so they came looking for me that day. And whenever I went to work that night at the Colony Club at 7:45, because that's the time I always arrived at work to do my makeup and stuff, there were two men waiting on the landing. And you went up a flight of stairs, a landing, another flight of stairs, and into the club. But I wasn't alarmed because a lot of times people would wait there for the party to catch up with them. But as I got up to that landing, the taller of the two men stepped forward, and he said, "Miss Oliver," and I said, "Yes." And he identified himself. He had proper FBI identification, and he said, "We understand." I don't remember the other guy's name at all. At that point in time, I really got scared. And he said, "We understand you were taking pictures at the time the president was killed." I said, "I was taking a film." He said, "Have you had it developed?" I said, "No, sir, I haven't." And he said, "Where is it?" I said, "It's still in my camera." He said, "Well, where is your camera?" And I said, "Well, it's right here in my makeup kit." We all carried makeup kits, little train cases with our makeup in it, and had a little tray on top with your pencils and stuff in it. And underneath it was, a little storage space. And I always kept a camera in there. I've always carried a camera my whole life. Now I just carry my phone. That was a good thing for me to use cell phones. And he said, "Well, we want to take that film and get it developed and look at it for evidence, and we'll get it to you in a few days." Well, I stooped down and opened the train case, toward the lid toward him, because laying next to that camera in my train case was a Prince Albert can full of marijuana.
Oh, no.
Well, Candy Bar had just a couple of years before that been sentenced to 15 years for less than a half ounce.
So did they see the marijuana?
So I handed him my camera, and I handed him the tray out of my makeup kit, and switched the hands to hand him the camera, put the tray back in my case so he wouldn't see what was in there. And he took the camera. Now, you'll read in other people's books where they took my camera. They did not take my camera. My camera was stolen in 1977 out of a storage building in the back of my house all around town. And So he opened up the camera, took the magazine out, and I guess that was the first magazine load camera there was. I had to send it to Rochester, New York to get it developed. And my boyfriend that gave me the camera, who worked for Eastern Kodak, gave me 12 rolls of film and 12 envelopes to mail it in. You know, those big envelopes that are already printed and everything.
Sure.
And so I said, okay. Well, I was 17. I wasn't smart enough to ask for a receipt or anything. I was just glad I didn't get busted and taken to jail. And so I didn't hear anything and didn't hear anything. And all those years, I thought they would be bringing my film back to me. And they didn't. At that point in time, in 1966, I married a man named George Albert McGann, who was the alleged leader of the Dixie Mafia, who was a hitman. At the time of his death, his slaying, he was accounted for 19 murders here in the state of Texas. And so I didn't really have anybody to talk to about it or anything, but I became a Christian in that atmosphere of being married to the gang, and we won't go into a lot of that, but I became a Christian. And it was a few months after that it was in, September. Yeah, September, he was shot 4 times in the back and the abdomen once. And
your husband was?
The Lord,
Your husband was shot?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the Lord was leading me to Houston, Texas, and I was a lady who stopped off in a little town called Joshua, where I'd been invited to sing at a revival there. First, that's just Joshua, Texas. And back then, I was really a looker. And I would stay in motels when I was singing in revivals because I didn't want some long-time person to say they saw me coming out of a motel room with a man or something. So I would stay in people's homes. And so I got there that afternoon just in time to rehearse with Jerry Wayne Bernard. He was the music director that's, I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, we were rehearsing, and this guy comes in the back door, and he comes up to the front. He's a deacon, and Jerry Wayne says, Beverly, by the way, why don't you tell Mr. Shaw where you were the day the president was killed? Well, I noticed his eyes got big, and so I just sat down. It wasn't that I wouldn't talk about it. I just didn't know who to talk to because, like I said, I didn't want to talk to the wrong person. I was scared. And so I sat down, and I started talking to this guy. Well, lo and behold, it was his house that I was staying at that week. That night at dinner, and he got the conversation back to Kennedy. And, of course, everybody else at the table got bored. He said, come on in, here's the den. He said, I want to show you some things and talk to you. So we go into the den, and there was the whole 26 volumes of the Warren Commission report on his library shelf. Well, I'd never even seen the Warren Commission report. And then I really got scared because I'm thinking this guy might be the FBI. And so we start talking, and I'm telling him everything I know, except there was a few things I didn't tell him. And then I meet and marry my husband, my current husband of 47 years, Charles, 48 years, Charles Massegee. And we were in Joshua, Texas, when Gary called and wanted to bring some stuff out there for me to see. And I said, okay. So he comes out, and we've always traveled in a bus. And so he comes in, and he brings some mud books that he wants me to go through. And either the second or third mud book I get, and he wants me to tell him everybody that was hanging around the clubs and stuff, and nobody asked all those, prior to the assassination. And so anyway, I'm doing that, and I get to this one page, and it was a mud book. It didn't have, this is an FBI agent, this is a cop, this is it. It was just pictures. And we get to this one picture, and I said, that's the man that took my film. He said, how sure are you? I said, I am 100%, 999.99% sure that's the man that took my film. Well, lo and behold, it was FBI agent Regis Kennedy, who was sent to Dallas on the 25th to help do field investigation into the assassination.
Now,
that night, they took my film.
Has he ever been questioned about what he did with the film?
Well, that's how he got killed. He was called before the House Select Committee on Assassinations to testify about that, and then he was found, dead.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I gave testimony to the investigators for the House Select Committee, and for the Assassination Records Review Board. So it is on record for posterity.
Let me ask you this. Now, after this happened, and I guess they came right pretty soon, they took your camera. But then when you saw on TV that Jack...
They didn't take the camera.
I'm sorry, the film.
They did not take the film.
But when you saw on TV that Jack Ruby had killed Oswald, and you knew Ruby, right?
Yes, he's a very good friend, and Ruby knew Oswald.
So then, what was your first reaction when you saw your friend Ruby shooting Oswald? What did you think then?
When I got home after the assassination, I knocked myself out with Tuinol.
Okay.
So my mother got home, and she woke me up and made me take her downtown to see the flowers. My mother never drove her life. She never had a driver's license. I didn't want to, and I'd already, the club was closed, and so I didn't have to go to work. And so I took my mother down there and got beautiful pictures of the flowers and stuff that afternoon, still pictures. And when I got back home that night, I knocked myself out until the next night when she wanted to go. And it was Sunday morning. I was asleep, and I woke up to him being shown killing Ruby killing Oswald on TV, and I thought I was hallucinating. So I laid down and went back to sleep. And when I woke back up, it was still on TV. And you talk about somebody that got scared. I really got scared then, because this is a friend of mine who had introduced me to this man who had just killed on television 2 weeks before. Is my friend Lee Oswald with the CIA. Well, I didn't know what the CIA was. In my 70s, I still don't know what the CIA is.
So prior to the assassination, Oswald introduced you to Lee Harvey Oswald? Maybe
3 weeks before. Mm-hmm.
2-3 weeks before. And describe that situation. How did that come about?
Well, there was a club that was open after hours called the Alabama on Lemon Avenue, and we always used to go out after our clubs closed and dance till 4 o'clock in the morning when the band stopped. And I was supposed to go out that night with Jada, who was Jack Ruby's headline dancer. And I had a horrible headache, and so I went over to the club. Our show was over before their last show. The 3 clubs downtown staggered their shows so that the patrons could go to all 3 shows. And so I was going over to tell her I couldn't go, and I saw him sitting at what we used to call the runway table. It was the table closest to the runway, and of course it was well lit because of the spotlights. And I saw Jada sitting there at the end of the table, so I went up there, and when I did, it was Jada sitting at the end, an empty chair, then Jack, and then this other gentleman I didn't know. And so when I got there, Jack stood up and pulled my chair up, and as I was being seated, he just nonchalantly said, "Oh, by the way, Beverly, this is my friend Lee Oswald. He's with the CIA." Well, he wasn't particularly good looking. He didn't have much to say. He was kind of quiet, sullen-like, and he didn't look like he had any money, so I didn't have anything to say to him. I was quite a snob back then.
Well, the typical woman, right? So, now, but later on, though, when you must have heard the name Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin of John F. Kennedy, and you knew that he was friends with Ruby. Did you contact Ruby before he had shot Oswald?
No, he was taken. I didn't see anything about Oswald until Jack killed him.
Oh.
Now I'm a news junkie.
Right.
Fox News is on my TV 24/7, 365. And but back then I didn't watch the news, and so I didn't know anything about this guy at that point in time until Jack. I didn't make the connection. I don't know. But I didn't make the connection until Ruby went into the basement of the police department and shot him.
Well, once that...
that's my friend going into a basement of the police department and shooting his friend. I was one confused little 17-year-old.
Oh, you're only 17, okay. At that point, then, so okay, at 7, that explains a lot. Okay, now, so then you didn't contact the police or anything with what information you had or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
No.
I didn't really know there was any reason to. I mean, you have to remember that back in '63, we didn't know all the stuff about the law like we do now because we didn't have the TV coverage that we have now. And unless you were a policeman or a lawyer or a judge, you didn't know all that stuff about if you see somebody get hit and run, you're supposed to go to the police, or you see somebody get shot, you go tell them. You just minded your own business.
Okay. This is a good time to take a commercial break. Okay. We're with Beverly Oliver Massegee. Huh?
There you go.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
And her book is called Nightmare in Dallas. Now, her husband is an evangelist and a pastor, you said? He's a pastor and an evangelist?
No, he's not a pastor. He's an evangelist.
And he was written a book called Rise and Fall of the Antichrist.
Yes.
Very people of deep faith here. We'll be right back with more of Beverly Oliver Massegee. And now a word from our sponsors. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application, from large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee station carts. CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website. Please visit them today at CartKing.com. That's cart-king.com. Or just call them at 1-877-986-7771. That's 877-986-7771. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subash Technosis by email at info@subashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing you narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Beverly Oliver Massegee, author of the book Nightmare in Dallas. This is the Babushka lady, for people that are real JFK assassination buffs that really get into this. The Babushka lady. Now, Beverly, so after you wake up and you see on TV there Ruby shoot Oswald, sooner or later you must have gone back to work at these clubs, right? What was the scuttlebutt? What was everyone saying then, the gossip? What were people saying?
Monday night was when I went back to work Monday night, 25th. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
I went back the 25th. The club was just absolutely loaded with news people and everything, and I just walked past them all and went right to my dressing room, and that's when Abe Weinstein came and talked to me and told me, do not talk to them, keep your mouth shut, because I had told him, that I was down there, and he said, don't tell anybody, keep your mouth shut.
Now, who was Abe Weinstein?
He was the owner of the Colony Club.
Of the Colony Club.
There were 3 clubs downtown. The Colony Club was where I worked. It was next door to Jack Ruby's club, but it was separated by a parking lot. And then on Jackson Street, 1 block behind those 2 clubs, was the Theater Lounge, which Barney Weinstein, Abe's brother, owned.
Okay. Interesting. Now, before looking back in hindsight, do you believe that Ruby had prior knowledge that the assassination was going to take place that day?
Well, he evidently did.
In what way?
Well, he didn't go and shoot Oswald because he didn't want Jacqueline to come back to a trial. He had to have been ordered to do what he did. First of all, he had no business in the police basement. And it would take an hour just to explain all the contradictions of everything that happened that weekend. And no, I believe that he had prior knowledge. I believe he killed Oswald under orders. We have proof that he had CIA connections, all kinds of stuff.
That Ruby had Ruby had CIA connections?
Stuff is, yes, he did.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, he went all the way back to OFI.
Okay.
And you can make a FOIA request and find out what he did, but that's just no. He was into it up to his eyeballs.
And how do you know this? You know this because you made a FOIA request, or some investigator did this, or some stuff that Ruby told you?
An investigator.
Okay.
Named Joe West, and there's so many now. Joe West. Well, the guy I talked to first, Gary Shaw, he was one of the first investigators. Him and a guy named Penn Jones, and you asked me earlier where the name Babushka came from. Well, I went down, I guess it was in 1969, maybe 70. I took, it was during the House Select Committee on Assassination. No, it was before that. So it was 70, I guess. And I took Richard Sprague and Penn Jones and Gary Shaw. They asked me to take them down. I've not been down there since then. And the Bruder film was not available until Geraldo played it the first time on his show when Robert Groden,
right,
who worked for the Yeah, and he got a copy of it. So I had not seen the Zapruder film. It had not shown on TV yet, and it wasn't available yet. And they asked me to take them down to Dealey Plaza and show them where I was standing. And they will all tell you that I took them into 1 foot of where I was standing that day that matches the Zapruder film.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, and then you wouldn't know this because you hadn't seen the Zapruder film, so that's a point you're making, that you're not making this up. But the thing is, I've heard that there were bootleg versions of the Zapruder film that were being passed around in circles in down there in Dallas. Is that true?
Well, I don't know. As far as I know, the only copies that were even bootlegged off of the one that Robert Groden had.
Right.
Because there wasn't any way to bootleg it.
Okay.
And then in 1977, the House Select Committee on Assassination, trying to think of the guy's name, it was kind of funny. They called me on my phone out. I lived out in Ranger, then 5 miles down a dirt road, and turned the drugs up on out. Nobody knew how to find me. And they called me, and he said, I can't remember his name right now, but he said, I need to talk to you about the assassination of President Kennedy. I said, I don't talk about that quick. so Jack Moriarty, that was his name. And so then about 2 minutes later, my phone rings again. He said, Miss Oliver. He didn't call me Miss, he called me Oliver. Miss Oliver. He said, I'm Jack Moriarty with the House Select Committee on Assassination. I didn't even know what that meant.
Right.
And he said, I need to talk to you. I said, I told you I don't talk about the assassination. Click. And then he called back. He said, Ms. Massegee, I have subpoena power. Do not hang up on me again. Do you hear me? We will either do this nicely over a cup of coffee, or I will subpoena you. Take your choice. So at that point, I agreed to meet him in Cokeville, Texas, where my mother-in-law and father-in-law lived, and my father-in-law was the pastor of the First Baptist Church, Cokeville. I met them out there, and that's also where my storage building was when my camera got stolen. And
oh wait, so
I gave them,
the actual camera turned up missing too? The actual camera itself turned up missing afterwards? Yes.
They had asked me, I think, I don't remember exactly how it all happened, but they asked me if I had sold the camera or what I did, but I said, no, it's out in the storage building. And suitcase. Well, out in that storage building was a whole set of the white Samsonite luggage.
Right.
I remember the round ones that they called hat boxes?
Yes, I do.
Well, in that hat box piece was a lot of my pictures, my old pictures of growing up, and showbiz pictures and stuff, and my camera. And Charles and I were gone for a couple of months, and my brand new baby, February the 27th, died on the road with the same thing that my 37-year-old daughter has.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And when I got home, I went out to the storage building for something and noticed the only thing missing out of the storage building was that hat box that had the camera and all my pictures in it. Only thing. But it had been broken into.
Gotcha. Now, when you went to testify before Congress, the Senate committee, did you have an attorney?
No, they came to me. That's what I did that day.
Okay.
I gave them my sworn testimony that day, and they were going to call me to Washington, but then they shut Baker down. They shut it down.
And did you speak with an attorney before then?
No, I didn't know I needed to.
Right. Okay, so they took you.
I've never spoken to an attorney about this. I talked to a judge friend of mine.
Okay.
But I've never talked to an attorney about it.
Now, what about
I mean, I'm willing to talk to him. I'll go to before Congress and swear to tell the truth. And of course, that doesn't mean much anymore, does it?
Right. Now, what about when Ruby was in prison? Did you ever have any contact with Ruby when he was sitting there in jail?
No.
No letters or anything?
Abe Weinstein. Abe was like my godfather. When I went for Abe Weinstein, I was 14 years old.
Okay.
Okay. And my daddy told him I could work for him, but he was responsible for me. I was not to drink, not to smoke. And virtually my daddy basically turned me over to Abe Weinstein. But when I was 16, I was 15 when I had a baby that I gave up for adoption. Then I went and had back then they called it minorities and liabilities, which is I became a legal adult at 16.
Wow.
Now they call it emancipation. And But still, Abe was very, very, very protective of me. And I was not allowed to go sit down in the club and visit with people till I was 18 years old. So I was...
Go ahead.
And I was kind of protected. And no, I wasn't a stripper. People always ask me that. And it's just what I tell them. I said, tried it once, and the man in the back of the room started yelling, put it back on. So I figured that was not my calling in life.
Okay. And, but also, too, but how close were you with Ruby? Your friendship with Ruby?
I was pretty close with Ruby. I had made a couple of trips with him out of town. He treated me like a daughter, too. People are always asking me if he was gay. I don't know. He never tried anything with me, but I was jailbait, so...
That's interesting. I'd never heard the speculation before that Ruby was gay. I know he had a strange relationship with his dogs. Any information on that?
Oh, Sheba?
Yeah.
Sheba was the child that he never had.
Do you know what happened
Sheba
to
was his baby.
Do you know what happened to the dogs after he was arrested?
You know, I don't know. A lot of people say, well, he wasn't planning on that, or he wouldn't have had Sheba with him.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's the best thing to do, because he knew, this is what I believe, he knew that they would find Sheba and take care of her. Where if he was at home in the apartment, it might be 4 or 5, 6 days before they got around to it.
Right.
But with his car parked on the street in downtown Dallas with the dog in it belonging to him, they're going to find that dog in just a few minutes. And that's what they did. And I think, now, I don't know for sure, for 100% positive, but I think that that Sheba ended up going home with Wally Weston, who was the comedian at the club, at the Carousel Club, and Shari Angel, Bobby Lou Misero, who was the other stripper there, another stripper. They were married. Wally and Shari were married.
After Ruby was arrested, did the Carousel Club remain open?
No, it didn't. I think it was maybe a few months. I don't even think Jack was still alive. I don't remember. The girls that worked there tried to open it, and they were open for a few days, but it just didn't go. Because, see, a lot of people don't understand, too, that in 1963, Dallas was BYOB. It wasn't liquor by the drink.
Oh, really?
No. And so you had to take your own bottle in. And so for whatever reason, I don't know, I didn't go over there. I went over there one day and talked to Andy for a while. And it was the only time I was ever over there.
Okay. All right, this is a good time to take a commercial break. We're here with Beverly Oliver Massegee, and her book is called The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application, from large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee station carts. CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website. Please visit them today at CartKing.com. That's cart-king.com. Or just call them at 1-877-986-7771. That's 877-986-7771. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com. Every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you can get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here today with the author of Nightmare in Dallas, Beverly Oliver Massegee, the Babushka lady. Beverly, you also ran into David Ferry?
Yes, he was at the club so often. After Jack and I got back from, I think it was in June, we went to New Orleans. He was going to be looking for a manager for the club. And then about September, I guess it was, maybe the end of August, this funny-looking weird guy shows up, and his name was David Ferry, and he started, he'd hang around the back of the door, and he would go help himself. Like I said, Dallas was BYOB, so the only place you could get a drink was from Jack's private stock. Now, Jack didn't drink, but he kept scotch and whiskey in a little cabinet for his guests. And so that's where he helped himself. And back then, the only thing we served, other than wine and setup and beer, was little pan pizzas that went in one of those roaster oven things,
okay.
Little toaster ovens. And he would go back and help himself to the pizza, and I never saw him pay anything, so I just assumed that he was the manager that Jack had hired. As a matter of fact, that's what I told Gary Shaw, and they laughed at me, and did for a long time, just like when I told them the FBI took my film. They used to laugh about that. I don't laugh about it anymore. And so I assumed he was the assistant manager that Jack had hired.
And you also met, you believe you met Raul, who was the shadowy figure around the MLK assassination.
Yeah, I couldn't swear to that. I couldn't get on a witness stand and swear about Raul, but I can about David Ferry and Oswald.
Well, then, without testifying, we're not going to put your hand on the Bible, but without testifying, can you describe what your contact with Raul was, or the man you believe could have been Raul?
Well, when Jack would have after-hours parties, and that's the only time when people say I worked for him, I didn't go. I was never on his payroll, but I would go sing at his after-hour parties, and I would bartend for his after-hours party. And like I said, I was pretty nice arm decoration back then, and he liked to have me around because, people liked it. And the one distinct thing that I remember, and I have to see if I can remember what the letters were, Jack had 5 tablecloths on the table, and this guy sitting there that I think was Raul, he was sitting there writing with a pen, because they didn't have ballpoints, so it was a pen.
Right.
And he was writing on the tablecloth, RG, 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 like he was trying to remember something. And Jack came over and jerked that pen out of his hand and called him a not so nice name. And he said, I don't own these tablecloths. I rent these tablecloths from a renting service. Now I'm going to have to pay for this one, you so-and-so and so-and-so. And that's the only reason why I really remember that episode. And I do remember that I was told his name was Roberto Guzman. And when he was writing RG, RG, RG later on, I thought, well, he was just trying to remember what his name was supposed to be.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we're pretty much running out of time. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to tell the audience about your experience?
Well, I'm always asked about the commission's report.
Okay.
And Ed, I want to tell you something. There's nobody in the world more than me that wants to believe the Warren Commission report. I'm very patriotic. There's 3 flags in my yard, 2 flags in my yard now, a bunch of little ones. And I'm highly patriotic. I love my country. I love everything about it. Even the bad stuff is okay. And so I'm not doing this because I'm against our government. I am against what some, I believe, rogue elements within our government did. I don't believe Oswald killed the president. I can go on and on and on, and it breaks my heart because I know we're not what we're supposed to be, but I still love this country. But the only way that I'll ever change my mind, Ed, about what I saw that day would be if the Lord Jesus Christ came here and stood right in front of me and said, Beverly, you're wrong. And then we'd have to talk about it.
Okay.
Because I know what I saw that day.
Well, that's a very convinced woman. Okay, very, very convinced. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to keep up with your work and your activities? Facebook?
Well, we have a Facebook, or we also have a website, www.massegee, which is MASSEGEE.org, or Beverly Oliver on Facebook.
Beverly, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. It was a joy to get to visit with you.
It really was. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, there we had Beverly Oliver Massegee, the Babushka. Check out cartking.com, 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services, like let's say you own an office building or a warehouse. Put one of these carts there in the lobby. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. From large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee kiosks or coffee stations, coffee carts, CartKing.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website, cartking.com. Please visit today at cartking.com or just call them at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you and you get a good deal. Oops. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator, Ed Opperman. Hey, thank you so much, Beverly, Oliver, Massegee, the Babushka lady. Nightmare in Dallas. Check that out. You got a lot of good content coming up for you. You got Gretchen Bonaducci, keep an eye out for that. This gentleman from the UK who uncovered this pedophile ring out there. I forget his name at the moment, but we have an hour with him. And I just did another hour with Doug Caddy, who returned. And we talked about the Russian dossier and his connections with Roger Stone. He actually dropped a dime on Roger Stone to the FBI about Stone's connection with Lyndon LaRouche and all this Russian shenanigans going on there. It's a very interesting show. I enjoyed talking to Doug Caddy. So a lot of good content there. Keep it up. Don't forget our member section. If you like this show and you want to keep the show on the air, the way to support the show is to become a member. And you get extra content. There's about 70 shows in there right now. We add new shows every month, especially, when we have the extra time, the extra guests. And I have a special commentary section now, too, where pretty much after every show, I do like a 20-minute commentary on the interview I just did. And that's up there in the member section for members only. For members only. And membership is super cheap. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll give you a membership of $60. You get 13 months for $60. You can't beat that. And so that's what keeps the show on the air. Also, too, if you want to sponsor, if you want to become a sponsor, advertise on our show like the great cartking.com, you can contact me as well at oppermanreport@gmail.com. And as we get more sponsors, we can add more stations, and then we can get better quality guests as well, too. So it works out well for all of us. So thank you so much. Good night. Once they're locked in that car, they think they got to listen to the show. iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Podbean, Podcast, YouTube, all that stuff. Played everywhere, all over the place. You can't miss the show. 10 different internet stations, People's Internet Radio, a public streaming network, awakeradio.us, IPM Nation, and now on Ocelli.com, on Chuck Ocelli put us on his station. So you can't, it's a rock bottom prices to advertise on the show, and that's how you help support the show. Also become a member, oppermanreport.com, or contact me for a discount, oppermanreport@gmail.com. Thank you so much, John Elite. I'm looking forward to being stalked by all these characters here. He got me hooked up with www.elitedarkesthour.com. That's ALITE. We'll have his book in the Opperman Report book store on our website. Check out cartking.com, 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services, like let's say you own an office building or a warehouse. Put one of these carts there in the lobby. Well, cartking.com can be the answer to your needs. Cartking.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail coffee and food carts and kiosks money can buy. For 20 years, Cartking.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. From large, heated, and secure outdoor retail or food kiosks to smaller, more mobile coffee kiosks or coffee stations, coffee carts, Cartking.com designs and builds them all. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on the website, cartking.com. Please visit today at cartking.com or just call them at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you and you get a good deal.